Okay, and we are live. I always give everybody just a minute. Oh, look, students from my middle school book club and sci-fi fantasy club will be joining the event. We already have a comment.
Yeah, great.
I do try to give everybody a couple minutes just to get on, since we want to be punctual, but we also want to give people a minute. So. I will welcome everybody. I'm going to do a quick logistics check on how everything's going to work tonight. Then I'm going to introduce our authors for the evening. And then I'm going to step away and enjoy their conversation as well. So I'm very happy that this is actually finally happening. I know we were worried with the craziness of last year with the publishing industry and when they were doing what and changing dates and things. We were worried we might not get to reschedule, but I'm glad that we did. We're here tonight. So I want to welcome everyone to the digital channels of One More Page Books. For those who don't know, we are located in Arlington, Virginia, just across the river from DC. It's nice that we can open this up to people who are not in Arlington, but we also miss having people in the store for events as well. But hopefully things will be changing soon. Maybe we'll be able to have folks back in. But for tonight, we're going to celebrate the release of Spellbound, which is the second book in Ron Smith's Black Panther series, which made its debut in the world today. So we're excited to be able to celebrate that. Before I introduce both of our guests this evening, I just want to let folks know who are online, if you would like to ask a question or make a comment. If you're on Facebook, you can just do that in the comments. And if you're on YouTube, use the chat function is the best place to do that, and we'll be able to see everything coming in there. We will try to take some time at the end, just before probably maybe 7:45 Eastern time, to take some of those questions. So until then, we're going to talk with these two authors. Ron Smith is an award-winning writer of children's literature, including the middle grade novels Black Panther, The Young Prince, and our new one tonight, The Mesmerist, The Owls Have Come to Take Us Away, and Gloomtown. His first novel, Hoodoo, earned him the 2016 Coretta Scott King John Steptoe New Talent Author Award and the International Literacy Association Award for Intermediate Fiction, which is a very long award title. Before he became a full-time writer, but though he worked in advertising and wrote TV commercials, but he's much happier writing books for young people, and we are happy he's doing that as well. And joining us in conversation tonight is Preeti Chhibber, who has spent her life being a fan of being a fan, which is one of my favorite descriptions that someone has given themselves. She has worked in children's publishing in New York before leaving to pursue writing full-time. She's written for Sci-Fi, Book Riot, The Nerds of Color, and many others. Her short story, Girls Who Twirl and Other Dangers, was published in the anthology 1,000 Beginnings and Endings. And you can find her, in addition to tonight, co-hosting the podcast Desi Geek Girls and Strong Female Characters. And with that, I'm going to pop out of here and let you guys have a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm so excited about this.
Me too. I'm excited.
So,
good to see you.
Good to see you too. So this is the sequel to Black Panther, The Young Prince, which came out a few years ago. And I was wondering if you would give us just like a quick kind of overview of what happened in the first book for people who might be new to the series.
Wow. Okay, cool. So the first book is called The Young Prince, and it's a young T'Challa, about 12 years old. And he has to leave Wakanda, he and his friend M'Baku, because there's a looming threat coming to the nation, right? So T'Chaka, the Black Panther, has to get his son out of Wakanda. So I thought, what better way to do that than to put him in a city that I know very well, and that's Chicago, Illinois, south side of Chicago. And once he gets there, some crazy stuff starts happening and some adventures get going. And he meets two friends named Zeke and Sheila. They become quick, fast buddies. And they have to go up against some really weird stuff that's going on at their middle school. And it's a lot of fun, a lot of adventure. And, the first thing I really wanted to do with that first book was to get young T'Challa out of Wakanda, to put him in America, to see what his life would be like here. So it was a lot of fun to see a kid coming from all this privilege to America where nobody knows who he is, because he has to be, anonymous when he's in Chicago. So it was a lot of fun. And we left off with, of course, the evil being defeated, which it usually is in middle grade books. And then we pick up about a year later with Spellbound.
What was it like coming back to his story? Like, what was it? You know, that was it is such a wonderful story, and he does defeat the evil at the end. But now you're back. So what was that experience like?
Well, it's a lot of fun. You know, I felt like I wanted to see the trio, T'Challa, Sheila, and Zeke, in the USA again, because there's so much to explore here. There's so much to see. And I said, well, where else do I know well? And that would be Chicago. I mean, Alabama, the South. So I said, let's get T'Challa to come to the Deep South to visit his friends. Sheila's grandmother lives there. So he comes to Alabama. And it's such a great setting because, you know, you've got the food and the slang and the, you know, all of the Southernisms. So I just thought it was a really, really neat location to put the trio back into. And there's so much to explore, from food to civil rights to everything. So I just thought it would be a really great place to put the next book.
Yeah, reading this, I was very upset. I couldn't like pull the food out of the book. Like, I was like, maybe I'll order some like takeout from the barbecue place down the street. I don't know. It's a very hunger-inducing book, I think, because the food all sounds really good.
Well, there's a place in the book. I didn't use the real name. I think I would have needed more clearance or whatever. But if you're ever in Selma, Alabama, you got to go to Laney's barbecue joint. I think I called it something else in the book, but it's the best barbecue for the meat eaters out there. It's the best place for barbecue. It's called Laney's, and you would not believe the sandwiches. So, of course, I had to give T'Challa some Southern barbecue. So.
I feel like every time he experiences a new food, he's like, this is the best thing I've ever eaten in my life. I felt very seen.
And he's encouraged by his friend Zeke, who's a big food eater. And quickly, you know, his friends Zeke and Sheila, you know, they're the same age. Sheila's really cool. She's into science, technology, STEM. Zeke's a super nerd who's into graphic novels and reading and books and games and video games. So together, the trio, they're kind of like a really cool unit, and they play off of each other well. And I really like the characters.
Yeah, their friendship is so wonderful, and it's such like a one of my favorite things about middle grade are when you have these like really beautiful young friendships that exist in the series. And I wanted to ask, like, was it inspired by a friendship in your life, or like what did you think about while you were writing these three kids like kind of going on these adventures together?
Yeah, you know, I think I had a little crew when I was around that age. It's hard for me to remember sometimes, you know, because I grew up in an Air Force family and we moved around a lot. So every 2 years we would move to a new Air Force base. So you'd make friends and then you'd leave them. You'd make friends and then you'd leave them. So there's kind of a joke in my story that I don't remember my childhood because we just moved around so much. It all just kind of blurs together. But I think kids can relate to it because hopefully most kids have some other kids they trust, a little gang, a little, you know, a little unit that they hang out with. And I just drew on that, you know, that the idea of friendship, especially in those middle school years, can be very strong. So I just really wanted to play into that.
Now, you mentioned sort of like putting T'Challa in Alabama and having him explore a different aspect of America, but something that comes up in the text a lot is him sort of recognizing the significance of the South with the civil rights movement, and T'Challa having to reconcile his identity as like a Wakandan, as someone who is privileged, with the history of Black Americans.
Yeah.
Why was that important for you to pull into the story?
Right. Well, I think it's important because if you're going to talk about the South, you have to talk about all of it. And we know that, you know, Alabama and a lot of Southern states were the pinpoints of the civil rights movement. So I think it was a way to get in a little bit of history for our young readers without it sounding like a lesson or some type of forced message. You know, it's embedded in the story. And of course, T'Challa is going to learn a little bit about the civil rights movement and Selma and Montgomery. because it's part of where he is. So I just thought it was an interesting way to put that bit of information in there so kids can learn about it and, really learn what happened there, how in the fictional world of Wakanda, it's so much different than what it was like here for African Americans in those years. So I think it's important that we kind of address some of these issues in books, as long as we don't do it in a heavy-handed way or a lecturing tone or moralizing. And it kind of makes up, it makes for a compelling sense of place, right? So that's really what I was going for. And I think it's important for kids to know that history, especially today.
That's very true. We were talking about this before we went live, and I had interviewed you back at New York Comic Con 2017 about The Young Prince, which I absolutely loved. And back then,
that was in the before times.
It was in the before times, where we could sit at a table together in a booth at New York Comic Con, surrounded by 8 billion people.
I know. It just seems. Don't you see like movies and TV shows now where you see crowds or people in elevators and you're like, what?
How did we do that for so long?
Sorry.
Well, we just got used to it, right? Like, I think I got sick after every single convention. You get the con crud, and it's just an acceptance of fact, right? You're just going to get it. We just lived like that.
Well, I really enjoyed that Comic-Con, and you had some great interview questions for me, and it was great meeting you there for the first time.
It was a very delightful conversation, but something you said to me, which I still remember, is that when kids are reading the first book, you wanted to make sure they understood it was okay to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
What is something you thought about while writing this one that you're hoping that young readers will pick up on?
Interesting. That's a good question. That's a tough one.
I know. I'm sorry.
You make me think. Well, I guess I would hope this would be the right answer. So I think it's about it might sound corny. I think it's about friendship and family and sticking up for the things you believe in, and that you have power inside of you, even if you're not a superhero. Like T'Challa's friends, Sheila and Zeke, they do what they can to stop this threat. They're limited because they don't have a panther suit made of vibranium, but there are still things you can do. You can stand up for what's right. You can protect your family. You can be friends with someone in a really, really close way. And I think it's just about friendship and trust and, making the right decisions that work for you.
That was something that stuck with me with T'Challa actually quite a lot, because he questions himself pretty frequently in the book, where he's like, should I be doing this? Is this the right thing to do? Which felt very real to me, not even just as a kid, but as anybody, like as anyone who is going through life and sort of trying to figure out what to do and figure out what choices to make. But I really liked that notion of these kids maybe not being 100% certain, but going for it anyway.
Right. And, T'Challa has a lot on his mind too. He is always questioning himself. He's wondering about his parents, and is he doing the right thing? He's supposed to take the throne someday. Will he be ready for that? So yeah, he's constantly full of doubt, and I hope that makes him more human to kids and more relatable.
What do you find most exciting about writing a young T'Challa, and what do you find most challenging?
Well, the exciting thing is just looking at the Young Prince on my bookshelf and Spellbound on my bookshelf, and realizing that I've written those books and they're Marvel and they're Black Panther is such an iconic character. That's the exciting part. And then sitting down to actually type the words T'Challa, T'Chaka, Queen Ramonda, Dora Milaje. So it's just really cool to sit down and just the act of writing itself, writing in that world, that mythology that Marvel has created. It's so vast, and it's so cool to just be a part of it. It's challenging. Yeah, it can be a little scary, as we may talk about a little bit too. But that's the fun part, just immersing myself in the world. The challenging part is, as all writers know, is can I do this again? How did I do this? I forgot how to write a book. All of my writer friends, if there are any writers in the audience, it's like you write a book, you finished it, it's like great. I don't care if you're writing 2 books, 3 books. It feels like like you're learning how to ride a horse all over again. So you start at that blank page, you go, well, I did it before, I guess I can do it again. And somehow it works. It's the same for you. But for me, plus I'm a very kind of not sloppy, but I'm a very kind of seat of the pants kind of writer. I'm a pantser. So I have to kind of discover the story as it goes along. So that's the challenging part, is going down a road where that you think might be right, but then you have to toss it 3/4 of the way through because it doesn't work, or just really figuring it out, putting the meat on the bones, as they say.
That's so
That's a
funny.
challenge.
I was very much a pantser before I started working for Marvel, and I think because of Marvel, I've become a plotter. Like by being like, we need outlines from you, we need
Yes.
we need all of those things from
Right.
you, which I would like grouse and so frustrated about having to do. But now I find that I'm so thankful when I get to a point in the plot where I'm like, how do I write this part? Like,
Right.
what? And then I realized past me figured it out and put it in a chapter outline.
That's great, because as you know, when we have the fortune to write for Marvel, they want synopses and outlines and stuff, and I've never been a synopses outline type of writer. So I would say to my agent, like, really? Oh my God, how am I going to do this? But because usually I don't write that till like I'm 20 or 30 pages in, and I kind of know where the story's going. And but eventually I got there. If you look at that as kind of a part of the creative process as opposed to a real right brain thing, if you look at it as a creative mission, a synopsis, then it works a little better. So I become a little bit more structured also in the gist of writing these 3 books.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of force you into it a little bit. So speaking of writing for Marvel and kind of pulling comics into prose, so this is something I hadn't thought about until I started. So I have a Spider-Man book coming out this summer. And
yes, Social Dilemma.
The Spider-Man Social Dilemma. I'm very excited. It's Peter Parker.
3 books, right?
3 books. This is the first one.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have like sister trilogies sitting right next to each other. But something I had to think about while writing Peter is pulling the visual of comics into the written word. Like, there are only so many ways you can say shoots a web during a battle sequence.
Yeah.
There's thwipping. There's pressing. There's a very limited amount of ways you can say it versus the multitude of ways you can show it, like sort of in the panel.
Right.
So was there anything from the comics that you kind of found that where you're like, this is a little hard to describe actually? Or was there anything that you were like, I can't wait to pull this into prose? Like, I can't wait to get this thing from the comics onto the page.
That's really interesting. You use the word thwack.
I use a lot of, there's a lot of like whispering sounds to myself to see how I can spell them.
That is a great question. I'd have to think about it, and I'll probably have a better answer later. But I think
go ahead.
I think the thing that gets me excited is when young T'Challa dons the suit, right? When he puts on the Black Panther suit, because you can describe the mesh kind of weave of it, the feel of it, like slipping into a black silk. There's all kinds of great ways to describe it. Something from the comics that I don't know. That's a good question. The 3rd book, I think it's okay to say that this time we're in Wakanda at the end. So I was so describing Wakanda for the first time. I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but I can't think right now of something from the comics that other than fighting and seeing T'Challa in the suit.
Were there anything? I'm thinking back to like questions I had to ask my editor while I was writing.
Yeah.
And in the first Spider-Man book, Sandman features pretty heavily as a villain. And I had to send her an email that was like, does Sandman have bones? Like, does he have like internal organs or anything? Or are they all sand?
That's interesting. That's what you have to do. Like, right, if you're putting the character down on the page, as opposed to the comic, right, you do have to answer those questions. And as you know, Marvel's great because they will send you stuff and tell you, you know, uh, in this book, there's a plot. Well, actually, it's the next book, but they will tell you, no, you can't use that because in 1967 on issue number 432, they know this stuff like the back of their hand. So it's really great to work with people that just know all about this world that's been created. So that's cool to get answers immediately, to know what you can and can't do. There were a few things I wanted to do, but I couldn't do continuity wise. I mean, as you know, I think the prose novels, the films, the graphic novels, they all kind of live in their own world. So they're kind of, you know, a little bit different. So overall, it's been a blast, and it's really been cool to get immediate feedback and advice from a team of people that know it better than anybody else.
Yeah, I did not get an answer on the Sandman question, though. I just kind of decided based on what I thought was right.
Yeah. Are you gonna tell us what it was? Bones or no bones?
I decided no bones. I decided because
like
he's all sand, he can just be sand. And maybe like when he's walking around, he might have bones, like when he's like walking around, but if he's being like squeezed, no bones.
The sand knits itself together. That's the word.
I know it is very funny, like sort of being in this position of writing a legacy comic book character. And there's a lot of like pressure and responsibility there too. So how do you balance that, like the creative excitement of it and the story you want to tell, but also remembering the long history and power of these characters?
Yeah, well, that's the hardest part, right? Is just kind of setting that aside and saying, let me just try to write a really good story. And I think for me, you know, obviously as a kid, I knew about Black Panther and I read the comics, but I didn't know everything, you know. I wasn't a super nerd. I loved Marvel and comics, but I didn't know everything. I couldn't debate somebody about the Black Panther and everything. So when I was asked to write for them, I think if I had known more, it would have been more intimidating, because it's like writing for, you know, just something that is so iconic. Oh my God, what are people going to think? Am I going to get this right? There's so much pressure from this, you know, there's so much history with this character. So I think since I didn't know everything and since I was a little bit removed, it helped me. I think it helped in the long run because I didn't have that pressure on me to like, you know, I've got to get this right. I mean, that still came, but it wasn't an immediate freak out, you know. It's like being, you know, asked to write about your favorite thing or star in a movie, whatever it may be. Having a little distance from it can be good. So I think that's helped me a little bit. And of course, now after 3 books, I think I've learned a lot more about the character and the history and what it's all about. So it's been good.
Who's been your favorite character aside from T'Challa to bring into the books?
That is a good question. You know, of course, his companions, Zeke and Sheila, but I thought it was really fun in the first book where I was able to bring in Nick Fury at the end. I thought that was a lot of fun. And I was like, what, can I do this? Can I put Nick Fury? Can I say this? You know, so that was fun to actually put that in there. I really enjoyed that a lot. And Spellbound has a really great villain that deep lore Marvel fans will know. His name is Bob, but he has another name too. So if you're into the Marvel universe, you might know who Bob really is. But yeah, so yeah, it's been fun to write the villains. and the characters. And also in The Young Prince, I created a character named Gemini Jones, who's kind of the antagonist. And he was a lot of fun to write. This kid who's kind of a bully in the school. He's got this little gang called the Skulls, and there's more to it than that. But that was fun to write too. This kid who's a tough guy, who's kind of the stand-in villain. But there are bigger villains than Gemini Jones, which we all learn later on. So yeah.
Gemini Jones is such a good comic name.
I know. I like that.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. Where's my
So you mentioned the villain, which I did want to talk about Bob a little bit without any spoilers. He is quite scary. He's a very I think at one point T'Challa likens him to the Cheshire Cat, the way he has that very uncanny smile, which I liked, and I love the visual of it. And you have brought some of your sort of trademark horror into middle grade level horror into this book. How do you kind of balance that right level of scariness with the suspense, with the adventure, all of these different sort of pieces of genre braiding together?
Yeah. Well, when I'm writing these books, like the Black Panther books and my other books, I don't necessarily think, oh, I'm writing for a middle grade audience. I just think I'm trying to write fiction that anybody can read, but it's mostly geared towards kids. And so I try to scare myself a little bit, and I go a little bit of the creeps without gore or blood, without overkill, because it's more about the sense of dread and the waiting and the descriptions. So you're going to go too far if your editor says, I don't think we should put it that way, or I think we should just roll it back a little bit, which has happened before. But I think kids can handle it. I think that kids like to be scared. Not all kids. Some kids like to be scared, and reading a book in the safety of your own home, knowing that it's not real, it's a story. It's just like a movie. You can close a book, but I think scary books are great. In defense of scary books, because kids face their fears. They see, their heroes win. They see everyday kids like them get out of tough situations. So I think kids can handle more than we sometimes think they can when it comes to that. But I think we also have to show them that there's some hope in it, especially today, because the world is such a messed up place. You just don't want despair all the way through. But I think that a good scare can be fun if it's done in the right way. And then seeing the after effect of that too, seeing what comes after that, whether it's peace or a hopeful message or whatever. So I like to write with that in mind.
I really enjoyed sort of how you pulled together a bunch of mythologies, which is, Marvel pulls together a lot of mythologies. They kind of take from all these stories, but it features heavily in this book, I think, than even in the previous book. Is that something you're hoping to build on? I guess how much more involved is that going to get? It's so hard because I want to be like this part, but I don't want to tell anybody what happened.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to remember, but I try to draw on a lot of different things. Like sometimes you stumble into really great things. Sometimes you plan it all out, and as I said before, I'm not really much of a real plotter. But sometimes you come across, sometimes it's kind of like backtracking, like you'll write and then you go, wait a minute, this happens here, so I can go back and put this over here and I'll make it seem like I had it figured out the whole time. I'm offering all the trade secrets. But it works. And that's part of writing, I guess, is what I'm saying. It's not like a shortcut or anything. It's for anyone listening, it's just ways that serendipity works sometimes when you're writing with everything else. But yeah, I like just drawing on something, that hasn't been touched on a lot, or maybe it's a certain word or phrase or a certain eclipse or a lunar, equinox. There's so many things to play off of, mythology wise. You can really mix a lot of things together. And sometimes you just put it all in a pot, you stir it up and you see what you come up with, and hopefully it's original, Yeah.
I know you're a pantser, not a plotzer, but the mystery in this book is so well constructed, where
Great.
I was really like, I don't know. I don't know how this is gonna go.
Wow. That's a great compliment. Thank you.
I
Yeah, I
guess.
mean, it's fun. It's fun to unravel it as a writer and to unravel it as a reader too, I would hope. Because, if you are going to put some type of mystery or some type of knot that needs to be untied, you got to make sure all the strands are weaving the right way. So you don't want to have anything missing, right? Because readers will pick up on that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a real nice feeling to know when you've kind of woven those strands together and they kind of make sense. Um, these are all things out of a writer's toolbox, but it's fun when they work. It's a lot of fun when they work.
Did you have to do a lot of research for this book? Like, how did you prep for your just writing it?
Yeah, you have to ask. My editor was very helpful in getting information that I would need, like character sketches, biographies. But preparing, you just, as you probably know, you just have to dive in sometimes. I try not to overthink it sometimes. Sometimes I'll just start writing and I kind of know where the beginning is and kind of what the end is and maybe a little bit in the middle. But as far as research, I guess researching, there's specific things in the book having to do with caves and mines and tunnels and, phases of the moon and the sun or whatever. So those are the research type of things, without giving anything away. But it's just the same amount of research any author would do for a book. I'm sure you've come across the same thing with your writing, especially in something like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
You have to tell me. You have to tell me. I'm railroading the interview. You have to tell me what is Spider-Man your favorite Marvel character?
Yes. I love Spider-Man so much. I love Peter Parker so much. Very excited. I kind of had a little bit of that problem you were talking about earlier, where it's like when you know too much and you're like, you have to. For me, it was just remembering that every writer's approach to a comic book character is different, and that's okay.
Right.
That there is no real consistency when a character has been around for like 40, 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like when I did Peter and Ned's Ultimate Travel Journal, which was tied into the Spider-Man Far From Home movie,
right,
I spent so much time on Google Maps, like dropping the little guy in and walking around like Venice and walking around Prague, because like no one's flying me to Europe to write this book.
Right. Now, is it one continuous story? The 3 books?
Yes, the 3 books, the trilogy is one continuous story.
That's what's it's interesting to me, because I can say, wow, I wrote a trilogy, but each one of these Black Panther stories is kind of a standalone. They kind of build on each one a little bit. There are things that, but I have great admiration for people that can tell one continuous story over several books. There are lots of our friends do it. You've done it. You're doing it. I can't imagine one long Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, right? 14, 15 books. So what is that like for you? Like, how do you sit down and do you figure the whole thing out? Is there room for, how does that work?
It's funny when I first started talking about it, and it's changed so much from our initial conversations, where it was initially the 3 books. It was always going to be 3 books, but they were going to be 3 standalones, focusing on different sort of like spider characters. And then it morphed into this like Peter Parker Spider trilogy. And I was like, oh, I have to figure out what? I have to write like a series. And it was using the synopses and using like that sort of Marvel forced story organization process, where I had to pitch all 3 at one point. And so I had to know how the story was going to go. with room to move within my little like paragraph pitch. So I was like purposefully vague on books 2 and 3 when I pitched book 1, so I could see how it went. And even now, like I've written book 2 and I'm waiting to see what they think of book 2 before I kind of come up with like a full real synopsis for book 3, because I want to know what worked and what didn't in the second one. But it does mean, sorry, go ahead.
How old is Peter Parker in this?
16.
Oh, okay.
He's a little bit older. It's sort of like an upper middle grade younger YA, because
that's cool.
Right? He's Peter. He can't be Spider-Man if he's younger.
Right.
Really? Yeah. So it was a fun experiment of like maintaining that young reader tone. I kind of liken it to like if you're into like the Rick Riordan Presents age level, like that's kind of what this hits.
Yeah.
And having those like teen problems, but not so intense teen problems.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
He has more spider problems than straight up teen problems.
Well, I can't wait to read it, and that's out in June, right?
It's July 12th. I should write down the date, but it's July 2022. Thank you.
Well, you heard it here.
But I think we're in the sort of like something that while I was writing the spider books, that's fun to think about, and I'm going to ask you this question, is if you could pick up a piece of comic book tech, if you could pick up a piece of tech from your Black Panther world, what would you choose? I know what my answer is because I loved how it worked out in the story, but I want to know what you would say.
Wow. Well, I need some vibranium. Maybe a vibranium ring. I don't know what I don't want to be, maybe, okay, I want the royal talon. T'Challa's personal hovercraft. No, that's too big.
No, you can say that.
Okay. But I also just want a vibranium ring that's really, really cool, and nobody knows, but I know that I've got this. If somehow I needed something, like I have to break a door, I don't know what I would do with it, but I like rings.
But you like having it.
Yeah, so I want a vibranium ring would be cool. Some of those EMP beads to throw at my enemies.
Mm-hmm. I want the beads with the like access to the information.
Yeah.
Right? Like I want to be able to
the Kimoyo beads.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I want. I want the bracelet.
Because like it can do everything.
Right. So you get like a hologram pops up, and that's what I want. So instead of the Apple Watch, I want the Kiyomo bracelet and beads.
I know the Apple Watch is so dinky in comparison. I was like, this is garbage. I want like the beads from this book where you can it'll find like Vegas search terms, like just the vaguest search terms, and it brings up exactly what you want.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, that's it. That's perfect. A good question. I'm gonna work on getting that.
Yeah, let's see how we can make it happen in real life. You teased a little bit for book 3. We know it's going to be in Wakanda, but is there anything else you can tell us about what might be coming for T'Challa?
Well, it's coming. Let me tell you. In The Young Prince, he is exactly that, a young prince. And he's away from his home for the first time. He's in a new country. He's faced with his first supernatural threat. And he achieves success with it with a little help from his friends. The next book, Spellbound, he's a year older. And, as he gets older, the throne is starting to become a little bit more in reach. We know that at some point, he's going to have to do ceremonial combat for the throne. So that's always on his mind, right? And he still has this idea of, is he strong enough? What would his father do in this situation? His mother is full of strength. All of these things are at him, right? So he's learning more, he's gaining more wisdom. And then by the time book 3 comes around, he's still young, of course, but he's got some experience and some years behind him. So he's This will be a big one, and I'm really excited by the third book. It's called Uprising, and it'll also be out this year, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 pandemic books. Can't believe it. How did that happen?
I think 95% of my books have been out during the pandemic.
Yeah. So this one is going to be in Wakanda, so we get to see Wakanda finally. So that was a lot of fun to write. Like, how do I see Wakanda through my eyes? So I get to describe it. So it's a lot of fun to describe the technology. You're going to see his friends again. You'll find out how they get there to this secretive nation.
Ooh.
She will be there. And something's going down on this one it'll be the biggest challenge yet. So
I can't wait.
Yeah, I think it's good. I really like it. Hopefully everybody else will like it too.
It looks like we have some questions from the middle school book club, so I'm going to turn it over to Amber for a few minutes. And if we run out of questions, I have more to ask. So
Great.
So I Googled this middle school because it looks like Paul Warner is probably the teacher or librarian there. It looks like it's actually in Washington State. So we're here across from Washington, D.C., and they are up in Vancouver, Washington, I believe.
Wow.
Paul, correct
Amazing.
me in the comments. But as he noted, that was the middle school book club and sci-fi fantasy club that's tuning in. So they do have some questions for you. We'll start with this one. How do you mix real middle school life with fantasy superhero life in your books?
I will answer first. I think real middle school life with fantasy superhero. Well, I think we talked a little bit about how middle school, you have your crew, you have your friends. I'm an old person now, so I have to think back pretty far of what middle school was like. And it's different, but there are things that still happen, right? There's the cafeteria, there's the playground, there's sports, there's gossip, there's friends, there's lockers, there's all that stuff, the bell going off. So I think you just have to, if you can describe what it's like to be in a school at that age and just transfer it to a kid who happens to have special superpowers, but's trying not to let everybody know about it, which can really cause a lot of fun writing as well by hiding your identity. It just kind of happens like that. So make it real, make it believable, and just have a superhero that young readers like yourself can relate to, hopefully. Even though they're a lot different, they can still relate to the characters. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, that made sense. It makes me think of, first of all, I want to say hi, Paul. I did a class visit with them.
Oh, wonderful.
Maybe last year. Now I can't remember because time is fake. But
it's fake.
It's like, I think about what G. Willow Wilson did with Ms. Marvel, with Kamala Khan and her introduction in the comics, which is like, it was like when Peter Parker was introduced in the 60s. He has... What makes them so identifiable is not necessarily the superhero problems, it's their real life problems. Mm-hmm. It's like the boy that they like. It's like not having enough time to do their homework because they're so busy superheroing. Like it's balancing all of those things, and it's basically they're teenagers and just happen to be superheroes. And I think that's where it comes in.
Nice.
I'll add this before we get to their other question, that they are so for your books. So.
All right.
And this was the other question that they had. Who or what inspired you to become a reader and a writer?
Preeti, you want to take that first?
Oh, okay. Oh, that's a hard one. Who inspired me to become a reader was my mom, because my mom was like, you have to read a book and talk about it at the dinner table once a week.
Oh, that's great.
Well, it was great until we grew up and I told her I wanted to go into the book business, and she was expecting a doctor. And I was like, this is your fault. You did this. And in terms of writing, I think it was, I don't know if it was a specific person so much of it as it was seeing what children's lit can do for a kid. Like books 100% were like the most important thing to me in the world when I was growing up. And they were an escape, and they were a way to learn about the world. They were a way to access things I couldn't otherwise access. And so I wanted to be a part of that and to bring in stories that weren't being told and perspectives that weren't being seen, and kind of contribute to that canon, and hopefully have like a kid read something I wrote and be like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I remember the moment it didn't occur to me that like making books was like a job. I didn't think about it.
It appeared.
Yeah, like I just didn't think about it. And when I found out that it was like a real job people had, I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. Well, we didn't have to read a book and report on it at the table, but my brother and I, younger brother, we were like complete fanatics for fantasy when we were kids. As a matter of fact, I just grabbed these off the bookshelf. These are like the old school Lord of the Rings, right? So this was what got.
Wow.
Yeah, these are. I told you I was old.
Those are wild.
Yeah, so we were Lord of the Rings fanatics and Narnia fanatics, and would read until our parents came into the room and told us to turn off the lights. And then, I just kind of fell in love with words and started writing stories as a little kid. And unfortunately, those stories are all gone. Who knows where they are, because we moved around so much. I would love to go back and see what I was writing back then. But yeah, I mean, for some, I just fell in love with books. I had a great English teacher named Mrs. Evans who really turned me on to books, lots of great librarians. And I just loved books from the time I could read. And then I said, I want to be a writer one day, and somehow it all worked out. So I feel pretty fortunate for that.
My 8-year-old and my husband have finished The Hobbit now, and they're actually reading it again. So they're it's still there, inspiring.
Yeah.
Oh, and Trish from our store is watching as well. She just tuned in. So yeah, those stories. So Preeti, you have a few more questions?
Sure.
I'll talk things out, and if anybody else has questions, feel free to ask them in the.
Okay, if you had to pick a favorite character who's not T'Challa, who's not Black Panther, who would it be?
In the books?
It can be no. It can be comics in general.
Well, I feel like I have to give up my nerd card if I don't have an immediate answer.
No. It's sometimes hard. Like, I feel like if somebody was like, who's your favorite character who's not Spider-Man?
Yeah.
A few years ago, I might have said Luke Skywalker.
Oh, yeah.
Or it's like whatever current hyperfixation I have. Like, I have read like 8,000 Batman comics in the last 2 months.
Right.
Just because I'm in the mood. And so it's very much Tim Drake Robin, like right now in this moment.
Interesting.
But
yeah, that's a good question. I'm taking it so seriously. It's like, oh my God.
Could it be Frodo? Who's your favorite character in Lord of the Rings?
Oh, yes. Definitely. Mr. Frodo.
Is it Frodo?
Mr. Frodo.
Oh, is it Sam?
No, it's Frodo. It's got to be Frodo. He's world weary. He's melancholy. He's angsty. That's me. He doesn't really want to go to Mordor.
But he guess he'll do it if he has to. No one else is going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when, people ask you about your favorite books, and it's always hard to give an answer. But I think Lord of the Rings for me really is, because it's the thing that set me off on the world of reading fantasy and writing fantasy.
I'm sorry.
You're back.
My browser was just like, I'm done.
Yeah, Tolkien and Lord of the Rings are probably my favorite things ever.
How did you feel when the movies came out? Were you a fan, or were you because I know that Faramir is very controversial.
Yeah, Faramir. There's also Glorfindel, who was not in the movie, who was replaced by Arwen at the ford, and there's no Tom Bombadil. So there's all kinds of things. But no, that was a dream come true. I mean, those films, I mean, that, you know, yeah, those films are fantastic even 20 years later. And they hit at a certain time in fan culture. You know, everything was just starting. It was 2000, right?
It's
So
2002, I believe the first one
yeah,
came out.
so it's amazing the way filmmaking has also changed so much, and what Peter Jackson did with those 3 movies for that amount of money and brought them to life, with changes, of course, but changes that kind of made sense. So yeah, they're my favorite books of all time.
Oh, so good. It looks like we have 2 more questions.
And you guys just made me feel old with the, how are those movies 20 years old already?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Okay. Michael Road, how did you both begin working with Marvel? Did you pitch them? Did your agent, or did they approach you guys?
Go ahead.
Well, for me, I had written 2 books, Hoodoo and The Mesmerist. And then I was fortunate enough to get a call from my literary agent, and said that Marvel wanted to know if I wanted to write young Black Panther books. And I was like, what are you talking about? I think you have the wrong number. But she said, nope. So yeah, I guess they were aware of my work and thought I might be a good candidate for it. And I'm really glad they chose me. And I feel really fortunate to have gotten the opportunity to do it. And it's been a real dream come true. So yeah, I was asked to do this after writing 2 other middle grade books, and I was fortunate enough to get a contract to write 2 more. So there's a total of 3. So right moment and right moment, the right time. So yeah.
I was freelance writing for sci-fi and kind of writing a lot of silly, funny Spider-Man articles. And a friend of mine's editor at Disney was looking for someone who could do a really fast turnaround on a tie-in to Far From Home, and he passed my name along. And so then I sent them some links to my silly articles, and they were like, this is great. Can you write a book in 6 weeks? And I was like, maybe, I think so.
Right. 6 weeks. 3 months. Yeah. That's fantastic.
That's awesome. It looks like we have some more students from Vancouver, Washington Elementary this time. What can you say to elementary students to inspire them to become lifelong readers? And how about following their dreams to become a writer or any other passion?
Well, this is what I would say very quickly. Thanks for that question. And I would say, well, like when I go to visit schools, which I wish I could do, but we can't do that right now. You know, kids want to learn about publishing and how a book gets made and how it ends up in the store. And they ask lots of questions. And I just try to say, look, I was like you when I was a kid. I was that kid in the back of the classroom who was kind of shy and didn't want to look at the blackboard. I didn't want to be seen with my glasses, all this stuff. And I discovered words and writing and reading, and it really just opened up a whole new world for me. So whatever it is you may be interested in, whether it's writing, which is the question, or anything, whether it's ballet or fencing or archaeology or whatever it is you want to do, just do it as much as you can, learn as much as you can about it, and then maybe one day that hobby can become your job. So whatever it is that you want to do, whether you want to be a lifelong reader and writer, just practice what you really love doing. And don't let anybody tell you that you can't or that you're not any good at it. Because when you're the age you are, you're really into whatever, right? Everybody likes to draw. You don't stop drawing until somebody says you don't draw very well, So do what you like to do, really pursue that, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. So, teachers and librarians share great books. If we get the right books in the hands of students, which is hard right now because we've got some people in the country that are not on the right path. But I think teachers and librarians have to get those books in front of kids and turn them all onto all the great literature that's out there. And then hopefully that'll just continue throughout their life.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I think, Preeti, if you have one more question, we could do one more.
Well, my question was, my last question was, what advice would you give to kids if they want to be a writer?
There
You
it
just
is.
answered.
And share and if there are any writers out there, find some like-minded friends or a teacher or someone who you can share your work with, but make sure you trust the person. Make sure you're kind of writing in the same things. Maybe you're both writing fantasy. It's okay to like share your work with a trusted friend and you can get feedback on it, see what they think. So whatever it is you believe in, just keep doing it. And hopefully you'll be on a virtual Zoom StreamYard link talking about your books someday.
No, hopefully we get to have you all
Hold
back
it in person.
Yeah.
So I'm excited that you guys have so much more that's coming out, and you guys both have another one coming out then this year. So July for Preeti. Ron, you said you had another this year. So
Towards the end of the year, I believe. I don't know the exact date, but
okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't wait.
Thank you.
I thank both of you guys for taking the time tonight, and for everybody who got to tune in online tonight, and for those who are going to watch us later. Yes, there is.
Yay.
Wow. And I did add a link in the comments because we do have some signed copies. So if folks want one with Ron's signature inside there, you can order that from us and we'll get that out to you wherever you are.
All right. Well, thanks to One More Page Books and to Preeti for the interview. It's been really great. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
All right. Ciao. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.